Hey everyone, how's it going? Brian here with another Java game programming tutorial. So, right off the bat, I'm going to say today, I'm usually at work right now at the time I'm recording this, but today I actually called in sick for the first time in my life. I've never called in sick at any job before. I woke up this morning with a little bit of a fever and a really bad sore throat. So, because it kind of hurts to talk a little bit right now, I'm just going to do a quick episode here. And we're just going to go through and clean up our code a little bit. I've been saying we're going to do this for a while. And we're going to do this in multiple parts, not necessarily in a row. Next episode we'll probably do some more serious programming. But we're going to keep coming back to this like kind of organization and stuff like that. This is not going to be an episode on optimization for our game, as in performance and whatnot, but more just making our workspace cleaner and fixing some issues. You can see in our list of classes here, we have a few warnings, such as the player, tile grid, tower cannon, and boot. And we're going to go through and fix those really quick. Really not hard at all, just going to be a quick episode, laid back, because I don't actually feel super terrific right now. So, but I still feel good enough to program. Just don't worry about that. So let's go ahead and start at the boot class. And most of the warnings we have here, if not all of them, well actually not all of them, but most of them are due to the fact that we're importing classes that we're never actually using. So up here in our imports, you see I just click the little plus symbol there. That'll expand to all your imports. The ones that are in yellow mean that we've never actually, or we're not actually using any of these commands or methods or variables that we're importing into this class. So you might be wondering, oh, and first off, before we go any further, everyone's projects might look a little bit different. So, don't get nervous if I have this line here and you don't. This is the kind of thing where we're not really implementing a huge new feature. So, a lot of this episode might just be me deleting spaces or indented lines. So don't worry if your project doesn't look exactly the same. And if it is different, for instance, if you don't have this line, then just pretty much all we're doing this week is going through our project and trying to spruce it up, make it look clean, rename our methods appropriately and stuff like that, and just making it easier to work with in the future. But anyway, as I was saying, if we are importing something and it's in yellow, it's underlined in yellow like that, what that means is we're not actually using this import in our class. So why is it there in the first place? Well, because if you'll remember a few episodes back, or even further I guess at this point, our boot class originally had a lot of stuff in it, right? Right now it's down to about 40 lines, but it used to be over 150, I believe. We used to do all of our, we had our tile grid map in here, and we were doing our drawing and tiles and enemies and all that stuff. We've pretty much taken all that stuff and moved it to the appropriate classes, such as our artist and our clock and our state manager. So we forgot, or I guess we didn't forget, but we just haven't gone back yet and removed these imports that we don't need anymore. So basically, if they're underlined in yellow, you can just click on the line and hit Control D on a Windows machine. I believe it's Command D on a Mac, and that'll delete the line for you. Optionally, if you hit Control Shift O, that will automatically get rid of all of the imports that you are not using in your class. After that, you can see here we are still making our game and updating it. It's commented out, but we never removed it, so it's going to remove this stuff. We won't need that anymore. And right there, and I'll get rid of these spaces. Just kind of make it nice and clean there. And ta-da, we're down to 27 lines now. Not bad. So let's go to the checkpoint class. Some of these classes are already fine. For instance, checkpoint, I don't need to change anything. Just get rid of the line right there. But there's no warnings, no misnamed methods really. I mean, some people might name it this, they might capitalize the X, but really that is kind of a preference. We're going to be renaming our methods, but that's not one that I would worry about. Let's go to our editor. This is a bit of a bigger class here. Handle mouse input. Get rid of that line there. Handle keyboard input. This all looks pretty good. Types, index. We're going to redo the way we handle our tower types and as well as our tile types, which is what's here, in a future episode, because we have lists like this in a few different classes and it's kind of redundant. So we can definitely spruce that up. Here we have new map 1, which is the name of my map. Yours is probably different. But since we're doing that, I might as well go ahead and delete these maps that we're not using. Map test 2, map test 3, and just keep the one that we're using. And editor, it looks okay. Let's go to our enemy class. Now here's a lot of stuff in here. We are implementing entity, so make sure if you don't have this that you've watched the previous episode to get caught up to date with that whole thing. X direction and Y direction, we can keep that there. It's just a reminder for us that the first variable in our array is X and our second one is Y. Find XD, check position. I could probably get rid of these. Those are just lines I'm deleting, as well as this. Oh, here we go. So, yeah, we're going to go through these classes and make sure that all of our methods are camel case. And so if you don't know what camel case is, it pretty much is just a certain conventional way of naming variables and methods in certain programming languages. And the way it works in this instance in Java is what we're going to be doing is have a lowercase beginning letter, and then for every word after that, it's going to start with an uppercase letter. So we already do that sometimes, which is really the problem. The problem is that we don't have a uniform, consistent way of naming our methods so far. So we're going to change that right now. For instance, here we have checkpoint reached begins with a capital letter, but update begins with lowercase. And we should have been doing this all along, and it's really not that difficult to just name them appropriately the first time. My excuse is that I work in multiple programming languages, and all of them have, or not all of them, but some have different conventions for naming stuff. But in Java, typically, you're going to want to do camel case beginning with a lowercase letter. So we're going to real quick just change this to a lowercase c, and populate checkpoint list beginning with a lowercase p. Find next c is a lowercase f. Find next d, lowercase f. Die could be lowercase. And I believe that's it. So now on the right, you see these little blocks here. These red ones are our errors that we need to fix. And pretty much the errors are where we need to change the name of our methods because we renamed them. For instance, die right here is now lowercase. Up here further, find next d. So just go through and make sure to appropriately, oops, I don't want to insert, appropriately rename your methods. Find next d. I missed one, there we go. Okay, and we have no warnings in here, so we're all good in enemy. Let's go ahead and go to our entity class, which is fine. We just made this last episode. Not really much we can clean up in here. We're obviously going to expand it and do a lot more with this class in the future, but we just made it last episode and that will come in the future. Game class. Now here's one kind of big change I want to make. Is we have this public static final integer tile size, and I was thinking about this earlier, and I feel like tile size shouldn't really be in our game class. I'm not sure if it really belongs in here, because if you look at our helper class, our artist, here we have our width and our height for our screen, and I feel like tile size is something that kind of belongs in there, especially because usually when we're importing stuff, for instance, we're importing something right here, we usually only import methods and final variables from our helper classes. So for me, it makes sense to have the tile size in the artist, which is a helper class, just to keep us organized and to help us remember where we're getting all of our shared variables and methods between classes. So all this to say that I think we should copy this line from our game class and delete it and bring it over to our artist class right underneath our width and height. And not only that, I think this is going to be the biggest change we make in this episode. We should actually start using this tile size variable. We have equal to 64, which for me is the size of my tiles. Yours might be different. Hopefully it is a gosh, I can't even think straight right now. Multiple of 2. So hopefully 16, 32, all good. Let's go ahead and replace 64 with tile size. And now we're going to import it because it's no longer in the game class. So up here, just go import static helpers dot artist dot tile size. And you'll see now it works. And go ahead and copy this here, copy it. And anytime you see 64, we can pretty much replace it with tile size. And what this is doing is it's making it easier for us if we want to change the tile size in the future, because right now we have hard-coded 64 in a bunch of different places. You'll see we have an arrow now in projectile as well as tower cannon because they're importing tile size from the game class while it's now in the artist class. But we'll make our way down to those classes in a second. So next after game is main menu. No warnings in here. Actually, this isn't that bad of a class. Pretty nice and succinct, considering it does a lot, right, when you're in our game. We can't run it because the errors are now. But I think we did a good job in this class. It makes use of our UI class as well. Down here we have a couple UI classes. But I'm actually pretty proud of how this one came out. We're definitely going to go through it when we optimize our stuff and kind of make it a little bit easier to add and remove buttons and whatnot. But for now, this is good for main menu. Player, we have a warning. And it is not because of our imports, it's because of index. Now, index, the same thing with our imports. It's underlined in yellow, meaning that we're not using it at all in this class. So why is it in here? Does anyone remember? It's because before we made our editor class, we were using the player to go through and change the tiles. Remember, we could like paint dirt and grass and water on our map. We were doing that in the player before we moved that to our editor class. So I believe we can actually get rid of this index variable entirely. Go ahead and delete that. Delete where we set it right here. And that gets rid of our warning. That was a pretty easy fix. Let's make sure the methods are appropriately named, which I believe they are. And let's go ahead and move on to the projectile class, which has an error because it is asking for the tile size, which is no longer in the game class. So instead of typing artist.tilesize, I think we should keep doing what we were doing earlier and just import it statically, which it already is. Oh, we just need to get rid of the game dot right here. There we go. Okay, no more errors in here. Let's make sure the methods are appropriately camel cased, which I believe they are. And let's go ahead and move on to the tile class. Here is another example of where we can replace this 64 with our tile size. And as I was saying a second ago, the reason we want to do this is so we can easily change the tile size in the future. So we're kind of getting it out of the way now because say we want to down the road make a high resolution version of our game where the tiles are 256 by 256 instead of 64 by 64. Or say you want to release on mobile, which has like a smaller screen and we're working with smaller amounts of pixels, we want to do 32 by 32. And you might think, well, if that time ever comes, then I'll just do it then. But really at that point, we might have twice as many classes and it might be a lot harder to go back in the future and change all these different hard-coded numbers. It's easier to do it as soon as possible. And we should have done it sooner before now, honestly. So we're already importing everything from our artist class. So if you still have tile size copied, you just go ahead and paste it there. And paste it there. And draw should be lowercase. And looks like we're all good in here. Yep. Let's go to our tile grid. This is going to be a lot of 64s, as you can already see. In fact, there probably is an eclipse, a way to find and replace right here. Find 64, replace with tile size. Replace all. That is a lot easier. We have an error probably because of our drawing. Yep. So we just renamed our draw method from the tile to a lowercase d. So we didn't fix that. And tile grid is all good. Let's make sure our methods, see right here, it should be lowercase. Get tile should be lowercase. Set tile. And that is it. Now you'll see that we have errors above us. We're going to do a second pass through because we're renaming methods as we go through each class. Next is tile type. Don't think there's much to change in here. Pretty small enum right here. This all looks good to me. This is fine. Tower. This is our skeleton class that we haven't really created yet, that we started last episode. And not much to change here. This is all the methods we made from our entity interface, so we know that they're all named appropriately. And yeah, we're fine in here for now. Tower cannon. Honestly, we're eventually going to delete this class, or not delete it, but completely rework it to work with our tower abstract class. So we're not going to spend too much time in here. We do have an error somewhere. Is it in our imports? No, it's down here. Oh, game to tile size, same thing. So get rid of the game, and that should fix that. If you're finding that tile size is underlined in red after you get rid of the game in front of it, that means that you're not importing all of the methods and variables from helpers.artist. So just make sure that you have this line somewhere in your imports. Import static helpers.artist.asterisk. If you have that, then you won't get an error from typing tile size. Also, there's a couple more right here. All right, and we have warnings up here for what, I wonder? Start tile and damage. We're not using these yet, but we're not going to remove these because we are going to use them in the future. So for now, just keep those there. I have a couple commented out things here when we're trying to create our targeting algorithm. Get rid of those. And all of our methods appear to be appropriately named. Yep. So let's go ahead and move on. Wave. Wave, I think, is pretty good. Need to lowercase that, as well as this. And then change spawn right here as well. And here. Okay, wave is good. And wave manager. Again, just renaming the methods. I'm sorry, I know this isn't like a super exciting episode. I'm trying to save my voice as much as possible. But this is something that we should be doing anyways, regardless of whether I was feeling perfect or not. I've been meaning to kind of go through this and clean it up before we go any further. Because that way we'll, you know, it's harder, the further along in a project you go, the harder it is to really go back and review your work and, you know, get reorganized. So I'm glad we're doing this now. Wave Manager, we're not using this yet. I'm wondering... let's keep this. Yeah. In fact, we should probably implement this pretty soon. Maybe next week we'll do that, where we can actually... Why is this not being used, actually? Current wave done update. Huh. Okay, yeah, so what we're doing right now is we're not actually sending the next wave until the current wave is finished, which I guess makes sense, you know. We could also have a timer between waves, which I think we will implement soon. So yeah, keep this variable here. We're going to have a warning because we're not using it yet, but we will use it soon. All right, and the helpers. Artist, I think is fine. You'll notice that we have a method here that begins with a capital letter, as well as right here. Generally, I keep the static methods capital so we can like differentiate them when we're in a class, right? It becomes apparent that we're calling a static method when it begins with a capital letter. It's up to you. You know, a lot of people will also do camel case on these where they lowercase the first letter, but I'm going to keep mine capitalized. Artist is fine. Let's go to the leveler because we have an error here. Grid.getTile should be lowercase, as well as right here, set tile. Get tile ID, get tile type. This is going to be part of our optimization episode because this is obviously could be shortened. This is another example of, like I was saying earlier, where we have our tile types kind of written out in multiple classes. We're going to obviously set all these to some kind of easier to access static class. But I'm not sure we're going to do it yet, so we'll figure that out in the future. This can all be tabbed over, but that's not really super important. And what is our warning that we're getting? Oh, am I not closing it? Yeah, it's never closed. Okay. So we'll do this, try, and then at the very end here, before we catch it, just type br.close. There we go, no more warnings. So now we just need to go through, again, real quick, just these 4 classes and fix the errors that resulted from us renaming certain methods. So here we have draw, should be lowercase, and set tile, and we're all good. Enemy class, have to scroll down here. Get tile be lowercase, get tile lowercase again. Oh, sheesh. There we go. And no more errors. Game class. Get tile. We really get our mileage out of that get tile method, huh? And down here, draw. Player class. Get tile. And get tile. And here, we're using 64 again, which we can change to our tile size. Tile size. And in fact, before I end the episode, I'm going to go through every class just to make sure. I'm going to hit Control F to search for something and look for 64 and see if it's in any of our classes. Nope. So I'm just opening the classes and hitting Find. Yep, here's a couple right here. And we can actually just type in replace with and replace them. Now in this instance, in our editor class, we're not importing the tile size variable. You see we're importing specific things from our artist class, just the height in this case. So right below it, just go import static helpers dot artist dot tile size. We're all good. Enemy, replace all. Entity, I don't even know why I did that. There's something in the entity class. That isn't. Oh, so you got to be careful. That's why you don't usually, or at least I don't, automate a lot of stuff. We have a texture named UFO64, and so you definitely don't want to replace that with UFO tile size. That would make no sense. Main menu, player, projectile, tile, tile grid, tile type. Here again, water 64. Do not change that to water tile size, as well as grass 64, and all of our textures for our tiles have the size in them. Tower. I don't think there's anything in here. Tower cannon. Nope. Wave. Yep. So we'll need to import the tile size into the wave class here. Import. Sorry if you can hear my phone. Import helpers to artist tile size. And finally, our wave manager. There's none in there. Okay, so a lot better. We got rid of a lot of our warnings. We might have gained a couple here. Wave manager. Oh, we didn't gain any. We just still have these here. We didn't go in our UI class. I guess we'll do that real quick. I don't think there's anything in here that really needs changing. We have our button constructors, get name, set name. The UI classes we've created aren't really that complex. They're kind of just holders for numbers, such as like width and height, X and Y. So not really a lot going on in here. For the UI, there's a little bit more complicated, but not too much going on. The warning we have is we're not using the texture functionality of our slick util. So we can just delete that, get rid of that warning. And the methods all look good. And I think we're looking good here, you know? So this is just a quick little cleanup episode. We'll do more in the future, not for a while. You obviously want to get a good number of episodes in between each of these so we actually have something to change every time. Before we do another cleanup episode, we'll probably do an optimization episode where we actually work on fixing up our code to actually make the game run smoother. So there are parts of our code where, even though organizationally it might look good, it isn't the best for our performance in our game, which might not be super apparent at this point because hopefully your game is running pretty smooth. I mean, I'm on a fairly powerful computer, but we're not doing any crazy, stuff that should be lowering your frame rate too low right now. But at any rate, we can optimize it more than we have. We'd be kind of just going at it, one step at a time and then looking back and seeing what we can improve. But yeah, sorry for the somewhat boring episode. It's all part of the game programming experience. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week on Indie Programmer.